Hello everyone, it's Pelicandude and welcome back to episode 3 of our continuing Kerbal Space Program series. And in fact, this will be the first episode in which we have to do a military contract. So I will actually be right back because I have to grab some dice. So I return victoriously with a little bit of dice, and let's see what we get. Oh, a 6. Very interesting. Let's see what that gives us. Alright, so we see that for a 6, we need to build a spy satellite. So after General Katton began to suspect that his girlfriend was cheating on him, he immediately spent millions of dollars of the defense funds to commission a spy satellite to help keep his relationship, and therefore the world, safe. Alright, so we're back at the Space Center, and we have a mission to get a spy satellite into orbit. But we have a little bit of a problem, you see. See, we do not actually have electric stuff. We don't have, we have batteries, but we don't have solar panels. So essentially, if we launch a satellite right now, it will probably die because it is not going to actually have enough charge to sustain itself. So we're going to have to do something a little bit mundane. We're going to have to go around to each of the buildings here and get science, unfortunately. So I'm going to do that and edit it out because it will not be very exciting to watch. Okay, so I am editing out most of the science collection from the Space Center, but I did want to show this one thing. This is the amazing vehicle that I've created to help get science from the various buildings. So let's show you a demonstration. Now the reason why this crew capsule is actually below this fuel tank is so that way Jebediah can get back in once he gets out and fly to the next building with the science equipment, because we don't have the capability to actually build ladders yet because those are advanced, newfangled pieces of technology. So as a result, the crew cabin needs to be ground level. So let's go ahead and fire this thing up. And throttle up. And activate stability assist because that's important, and we're going to very carefully land over here. Alright. Ever so gently, we're going to try and come down on top of the VAB without killing ourselves, of course. That is the great concern. So just gonna ease our way in here and cut the thrust. No, don't tip over, don't tip over. Okay, well, we tipped over, but at least, I gave a little bit of a demo of how to use this thing, right? It'll be fine. Alright, and there we go. After recovering science data from multiple biomes around the Space Center, I now have enough science to get ourselves some solar panels. And we'll be able to make a spy satellite for General Katton. That's totally not a reference to anything like everything else in Kerbal Space Program is, just with a K shoved on the front, right? Right? Alright, so here we go, we're in the vehicle assembly building now. And of course, as I was kind of discussing last episode, this will have to be launched into a polar orbit in order to really be effective. So we actually got quite a few things, as you can see. With that electric upgrade, we can actually put lights on our spacecraft. Now, so first things first, we're going to put these new solar panels on here that we just paid for with 90 precious science points. Now, these will be extremely helpful in long-duration missions. We're going to put them on in that kind of cool configuration like that, I think. That looks kind of neat. And then also, we're going to create kind of the spy part of it. So we're going to take a bunch of little antennas and we're going to try and get them looking sort of like a telescope type camera system. So if we extend all these, actually let's retract it and we'll put them on an action group so that way we have, that way it just looks better. So let's, yeah, there we go. And now if we hit action group 1, I'm not sure if we can actually use action groups in here, but the point is, all those will extend at the same time, and that should look sort of like some sort of, some sort of camera. I'm struggling for words here. I'm terrible at this. Alright, so let's get another ring in here. And this one will be like radio interception type stuff. You know, those actually will serve as antennas, or perhaps we should have dedicated antennas for that, you know, that don't look the same as the telescope, just to keep things all right in the fiction of this universe. So let's go ahead, and to keep it looking intriguing, we'll put on a double system like that, or even more intriguing, we can use 2 structural units here, and then we will have 2 more fuel tanks, and on these fuel tanks we'll have little tiny engines, so that way, you know, in reality we'd have to actually keep this thing in orbit every once in a while by firing those, but obviously it's Kerbal Space Program, so there's no need, but you know, might as well serve its part well. And then for the radio interception equipment, we will need some of these. So we'll put these on... Where do we want these exactly? I guess we'll put them on the sides here. I guess that makes sense. And this will be a rather formidable spy satellite. You do not want this thing looking at you. And then we'll put, in case we ever need to send a crew to service this thing up, we'll put some lights on it, so that way we'll have an easier time seeing it once we start getting close to it. And that way, if again we ever need to send up like crew to work on it, we will actually be able to do that without too much difficulty. We'll obviously be leaving those off a fair amount of the time, but you know, for at least part of it we'll have those on. And then we need some batteries, because obviously this thing's not going to be pointed, this thing will not be exposed to the sun all the times, because there will be times when it'll go around the back of the planet. And then we'll put a couple more solar panels on each side here just to be safe, and this is looking like a, you know, a decent little spy satellite, if I do say so myself. So obviously we're not putting any weapons on it, it's just a spy satellite, and the reason why we're not doing a weaponized contract yet is because I have not actually unlocked precision engineering, which is the technology that is required in order to install weapons on your systems. That is what BD Armory unlocks on. So once we get that though, which will hopefully be pretty soon here, by episode 6, our second military contract, we'll hopefully be able to make a weaponized unit. But this will be, you know, our first military contract, and in episode 6 we'll be able to actually put weapons on our military contract. So hopefully we'll make like a fighter or something come episode 6. But yeah, this is the satellite. So this is what it's going to look like, minus, oops, I'm going to shift click to select the whole thing, minus the decoupler, obviously, that will not be one of the final things, but this is how it is going to look. And for our second action group, we're going to go ahead and put these antennas on it, and then for our third action group, we can put the lights on those. There we go. I could have just technically left those on the white action group and it would have been fine, but whatever. So this isn't a terribly heavy craft, but you know, we want to get this thing into orbit quite easily. So let's go ahead and we'll slap on the booster stage. So we'll put an LTV-45 on there, and then we want some cross feeds. So we're going to put in 2 more of these big booster sections for our tri-core rocket. And then we're actually going to put solid rocket boosters, 1 underneath each of these, just to get us some altitude off the launch pad, I think. And you see that I'm doing this cross feed, so that way we'll be able to get a lot more delta V, because essentially when these 2 detach, this one will still have a full tank of fuel, the center tank there. So things will be very, very nice, hopefully, for this satellite. We want to put on a couple struts just to make sure the whole thing doesn't bang into each other. That would be unfortunate. Space tape, as these are called. And then we want those solid rocket boosters that I was talking about, just to get us a little bit more Delta V off the launch pad. We're going to use these Rockomax, slightly bigger SRBs. These are not the biggest SRB in the game, but they're the biggest one we currently have access to. So that is our rocket. It looks pretty alright. We'll give it some structural stability, and everything should work fine when we try and launch this thing. Of course, those are famous last words, but you never know. And if this thing succeeds, we're going to put it into a low Kerbal orbit, so that way it'll have optimal viewing on General Katton's girlfriend. I mean, the possible threats that it, could be threatened, could be a threat to our nation. And here we go. Let's save it as this. Oh wait, no, we don't want to save it as the Science Lander. We're going to save it as Katton Sat 1. A cryptic code name. What could it possibly be? Certainly not a spy satellite. And let's launch it. Again, we're going for a polar orbit, so we might as well fly north, right? We kind of flew south for that suborbital mission. So let's fly up north and deposit it into orbit that way. And before we launch, we need to move these supports to fire at the same time as the SRBs. And now we are ready. 3, 2, 1, launch! There we go. Up, up, and away we go. Cool smoke effects, I must say. But yeah, these solid rocket boosters, they won't be the biggest help in the world, but they get us further than if we didn't have them. And interesting note about solid rocket boosters, they're much cheaper than liquid engines. So if you're in career mode where you actually have to pay for these parts, you have a budget in terms of money, solid rocket boosters, if you can get away with using them instead of liquid fuel engines, are a much more solid choice in most situations because they're cheaper. And cheaper things just, they don't strain the budget as much, obviously. So let's head north, where we can start filming a Coca-Cola commercial once we get there, with some polar bears and stuff like that. And hopefully this thing will... Oh, throttle up all the way. Duh, I was wondering why I was losing velocity there. It's because I was an idiot and didn't throttle up my engines enough. No matter, we should still be fine for our orbital insertion, and it should be pointed out, even though it shows fuel draining from this engine here, as soon as we eject these tanks, I will have a full tank of gas, again, because of these fuel crossfeeds. And that is actually, it's more efficient. It is more efficient in terms of the amount of velocity I will get out of this rocket to do it that way, where I have these two feeding into the center one, than just having all three of them firing at the same time. So just a fun little note if you didn't already know that. And here we go, up, up, and away. We're getting onto our solid polar orbit here, or not orbit yet, but we're on a solid northern trajectory as we climb higher and higher into the atmosphere. If it's not a perfect polar orbit, I won't be too freaked out. I just didn't want to put this thing on a non-polar orbit because that didn't make sense. If we did an equatorial orbit, it would have been a little bit silly. Like, why would you put a spy satellite on an equatorial orbit? I think I've already discussed that. But, it just makes more sense. And fun little note for decoupling, instead of using separatrons, a good way to make sure that your decouplers won't kill the rest of your spacecraft upon separating is to try and make it where the engines you're separating, the stages you're separating, are below, either they stick further back than your main stage, and I find that you don't usually need to use separatrons as long as that is the case. And you see we are climbing pretty quickly now into the sky above Kerbin. We're going to cut it at about 120 kilometers, apoaps. And here we go. We are nearly in space. We still have plenty of fuel left in this stage, more than enough fuel to get us into orbit. And of course, if we need to, we still have a little bit of fuel and these engines on the satellite itself. So we can use those perhaps to do some of the more finite orbital corrections. But yeah, let's fly up a little bit. And then we will make our burn. Make our orbital insertion burn, hopefully. That is the desired outcome. So as you can see, the orbit kind of wants to turn towards with the rotation of the planet. That's because we were obviously moving with the rotation of the planet when we launched. And so that's the way the rocket wants to fly. And so I'm not going to fight it too hard. I will fight it a little bit, just so that way we try and get on a more polar orbit. But it's not really the end of the world if we are on a slightly inclined orbit. So we're going to fly up to apogee again. Or apoapsis, whatever you prefer to call it, and then fire once more. And we should bring ourselves fully into orbit on this burn. And what we will do now is we'll fire down a little bit almost, and we'll use perhaps the stage, the actual satellite maneuvering system, to correct our orbit and get it as circular as we want it to be. So, you know, 150 kilometers wouldn't be a bad orbit altitude for this spy satellite, though, now that I'm thinking about it. Perhaps we should try and circularize at 150 kilometers, although what we should do... it'll be okay. What I was saying, what we could do is... You know what, I like that idea. We're going to point retrograde. We're going to burn just a little bit to bring our periaps back down to about 60 kilometers. We're going to jettison that stage, and then we're going to use our little... wow, that's interesting. We're going to use our little maneuvering thrusters to complete the rest of our orbital insertion. And the purpose of that will be... Okay, there we go. That's about as close to 150 as we're getting. The purpose of that will be that this booster stage will now drop back into the atmosphere and burn up, and we won't have debris floating around in space, because, you know, that wouldn't be cool, having space get cluttered with all kinds of debris. So we're going to accelerate time as we round the planet. Our periaps is now at 102. Wow, yeah, that is about as close as you are possibly going to be getting to 150 kilometers. I'm at 150 kilometers and 1 meter manual firing of the engines. That is cool. We're going to wreck it up a little bit when we make our burn to circularize. But, you know, that's okay, because that is just pretty... I think that's pretty cool that we managed to do that. You know, I'm not gonna lie. So, alright, let's make our burn now. Yeah, as you can see, we've added a couple meters to it. And then we'll zip back up to apoaps again. And there we go. So, as you can see, our apoaps is now... We're going to turn off the SAS, and our apoaps is now at... about 570 meters above 150, and this is... So we have a regularity in our orbit of about 500. That's weird that we're spinning like that. I have no idea what could possibly be causing that. But let's just turn on stability assist. We're going to point down at the planet, because this is a spy satellite, of course. And we'll... Let's see. There we go. That looks alright. We're pointing down at the planet, and we'll get on the sun side of this so we get a better view, and we'll deploy the camera Whoa, that actually looks kind of nice. I like the look of that. It almost looks like a minigun, but we'll say it's a advanced camera type system. And then we'll deploy the electronic eavesdropping devices. There we go, those different antennas for electronic eavesdropping purposes. And let's turn the lights on just to see how they look. Yeah, it looks alright. You know, the spacecraft does not look half bad. We'll turn the lights off so that way it's harder to see in the night sky. If someone was looking at it for devious purposes. And right now I'm sure it's getting some beautiful pictures of the polar ice caps and the bathing habits of polar bears and other things that the general might be interested in. So yes, there we go. Our first military contract is now complete. We have an operational spy satellite in a roughly circular orbit at 150 kilometers, where it can eavesdrop on all sorts of interesting and fascinating type things. And yeah, that will conclude our third episode. So thank you for watching, everyone, and I hope that you have a nice day.